so please feel free to interrupt as we're going. We're okay with that, as opposed to waiting till all the way till the end. Sometimes the question is right then, so we're good with that. But for the next hour or so, we'll be talking about effective communications with clients. Those are very fancy words, but real talk. Yeah, real talk with what we do. So we're going to start with some fun stuff. Let's see. This should automatically play. Shouldn't be the keyword, but that's all right.
Baby, do it. I'm with. No, go. I'm okay. Why?
Okay. I just killed the video on that. I don't know if that sounded like alien talk to you guys. It definitely sounded like it to us. So here is our backup plan, plan B. I'm glad we did this. This is what the video would have said. I would say raise your hand if you can't, but just take a look at this screen and see if this makes sense to you. When I first saw this, the answer was no. It was in fact alien talk. After Mr. Gentleman in the video kind of read it out loud and I watched it 37 times, it made a little more sense to me. Jasmine, how much of that makes sense to you?
This isn't typically how I speak or how I text, but I was able to get through it pretty well the first time. Some of them were a little new to me, but
this is typical.
Yeah.
Conversation for our clients, right? There is nothing weird about this popping up on the screen of basically every single one of the children that we represent in court. And as you can see, it is absolutely a different language. And the reason we want to talk to you guys for the next hour or so is this is the epitome of it. This is they speak a language, we speak a language. And if we're going to do our job and do it well and do it right, then we need to find some middle ground. To be able to, this is what we call transition, effectively communicate with our children. So what is effective communication? Effective communication is the process of exchanging ideas. This is the boring stuff, right? Thoughts, opinions, knowledge, and data, so that the message is received and understood with clarity and purpose. If we're going to talk, and they're going to talk, we might as well be talking to each other, with each other, and not at each other. The way we want to talk about this concept with you guys, this concept of communicating with our clients, we're going to break it down into a few different categories. We'll talk about the social development of the children that we represent to give you a context of where they are in their brains and in their lives. We will talk about the reasons that we want to communicate effectively with them. Some of them you guys know, but hopefully we'll put some new things in your minds about why we do what we do. We will definitely touch on the ethical reasons why we need to be effective communicators.
That's a big one.
Yes. And then we will be happy to throw some tips and tricks at you. I will probably have Jasmine translate some things. But hopefully what we have to say to you for the next hour or so will help you in your practice, help you be a better attorney, but also ultimately get more joy out of what you do.
Yeah.
Burcu, before you go further, there is a hand raised. I think there's a hand raised by Ruth Cruz Nicholas.
Okay.
Did you have a question?
It does. It might be me.
Well, it may be an accident, so I will say go forward and we can check back in with her later.
Sweet. All right, so when we talk about the adolescent identity development, the context of where our kids are, we'll break it down into sort of the three major age groups that the scientists kind of have decided because they have similar characteristics within those age groups. So just to be sure, there's a link down there at the bottom of the screen, actforyouth.net. That's where I'm getting this information. In another life, I might go into psychology, but not my domain. This is what the scientists have to say. And those of us who have either worked with kids, had kids, or if you're fortunate enough to be a kid yourself, should have some context already to see some of these things happening. But so 10 to 14-year-olds, those are the kids that the youngest within now, thankfully, within the court systems, youngest age that they can come in at. These are the things that they're experiencing. They are having better speech. They're improving their speech and being able to express themselves better. They're identifying that they're maybe not perfect. They may not say it out loud, but they're starting to recognize that. They are looking for their new tribe, their new group of people, their friends, in addition to their parents. But if it's a stressful situation, there's a good chance that they're going to go back to that childish behavior. And those close friendships that they have, those are gaining a lot of importance during this time frame in their life. The next age group, 15 to 16-year-olds, they are starting to really get self-involved. They're complaining about their parents interfering with their independence, which is important to us to remember as attorneys because we are representing that child, and it's that child's decision what they do in the courtroom. They are starting to get extremely concerned with their appearance and their body, and then combine that with that continued need to be accepted by their friends and their peers. And then once we reach that top end of at least the children that are brought into juvenile court, but still the period of time where their brains are developing, they do have a firmer identity. They are better able to express themselves. All of these things that we tend to call maturity, those things are really starting to show. They have the developed sense of humor, even if we don't agree with it all the time. And they're becoming significantly more self-reliant. Mm-hmm. And the biggest thing I think about this age is that they are appreciating and having a greater concern for other people. So I'm going to pass the clicker off to Jasmine, and she's going to show us some real world examples of what we've been talking about.
All right, so we thought that it would be a good idea to take some real life examples of social media that, our kids have access to on a regular basis, that are full of comments that our juveniles might make on a regular basis. For those that can't see what this is saying or are having a hard time, you're doing something else while you're listening in, the initial caption says, Marseille Martin is definitely serving in this color. We can just kind of do like a little popcorn session situation. If anybody knows what that general phrase right there means, Marseille Martin is definitely serving, you just kind of unmute yourself, throw anything out there. If you feel more comfortable leaving your screen off, that's absolutely fine too. But all suggestions are welcome, and we're trying to make this a little interactive in places.
Looking good.
Feel free to use the chat box too.
There we go. Okay, I see you, Mr. Ant. Does anybody else agree, disagree? Does anybody else have a different take?
1 minute.
Somebody's gonna have to translate that from dog to human for me.
Right, so the answer that we got, I think that was from Mr. Rant, said that she's looking good, and that's exactly what that means. Particularly on serving, it's just you look good doing what you're doing. That color looks good on you. That outfit looks good on you. Moving on to the second slide, if you look at the yellow arrow, it says Bay always eats. Does anybody have any suggestions, ideas, any kind of guess as to what this might mean?
I feel like this is not McDonald's that we're talking about.
It means she did well.
Okay. Do we have anyone agree, disagree? That's a good one right there.
I was going to say the person was fat.
Okay, I see that Philip Carey put in the chat box that they always look good. Yes, all of these are correct answers. Basically what this comment is saying is that Marseille looks good and she always looks good in whatever it is that she puts on. The third one said, we love an unproblematic Black queen. Does anybody know the context in which unproblematic is being used in this situation? Or just in general reference to Marseille? This one's a little tougher because I think you kind of have to be familiar with her as a person, but we do think that this is important to talk about.
Is the unproblematic mean that she's easy and that this will go a lot quicker, so to speak?
It does in some contexts. Does anybody want to kind of build on that?
That she doesn't involve herself in drama or other people's opinions.
There we go. There we go. That's the one. That's the one right there. She's never in the mix with the drama. She kind of does her own thing. Generally, when you see her name pop up, it's not connected to any scandals or anything else like that. And then emphasis on the part queen. It's just kind of how people refer to themselves. It's, you know, it's up there with, you know, girls, sis, stuff like that. But it is more so used in minority communities. But that is just a general frame of reference for how Black women tend to address other Black women. Let's see.
Let me see. I think I clicked something.
Out here breaking stuff.
Yeah. All right.
All right.
Let's see if that. There's this interesting delay between the computer and the screen. Okay. So this is, we put this one up there, not so much for the comments, but as a reminder that, you know, obviously statistically, there's a disproportionate number of children of color, children of minority in the juvenile justice system, in the justice system altogether. We know this, but there are going to be those counties, and I was from one of them in my private practice, where there are literally so few people of color in the community that it's like they can't find them to bring them to court. I didn't just say that out loud, my bad. But so there are areas in North Carolina where it's, you know, it's white children that are in court, and just because they're not Black, not minority, doesn't mean they're not developing under the same scientific developmental milestones, and B, doing the same things, enjoying the same music, on the same social media, obviously. So just a reminder that while the predominant color in the courtrooms is in fact color, this is applicable, almost said it right, applicable across the board. So let's see. Oh, Jasmine, it's your turn again, because there's things on here. I've already had to ask her 3 times. What does this mean?
All right, so this is a post from Shade Room. Alicia Keys' husband made a post that said, basically, my boy said, I'm not playing no games on mom's stage. He's a real serious one. Thank you, Jen. We love you and your protection. He didn't care that she was live on stage. So basically, this is just a picture of Alicia Keys' son just hanging out on stage with her while she was performing. And one of the comments, the first one says, with the Crocs on, ready to slide something. Does anybody have any guess as to what they meant by ready to slide something?
I'll give you a clue. It's not sliding the Crocs on. Jaretta says dance.
All right. Do we have any other guesses from anybody else?
Ready to slide into a fight.
That was, yeah, that one was definitely closer. Any other guesses? All right, so basically what's meant by ready to slide something, he was ready to do whatever he had to do to make sure that his mom was protected if something were to happen. This is around the time that there have been a lot of issues with performers having things thrown at them while they were performing on stage. And so it was just, you know, he wanted to be his mom's bodyguard just to make sure that kind of stuff didn't happen. And he was willing to do whatever he had to do to make sure his mom was safe. This one kind of tickled me, and I giggled in Southern Baptist when I read it. Second comment says, you only get one mom. He was ready to go from Genesis to Revelation in that piece. I approve this message. # Crocs in sports mode. Does anybody just have any guesses? This is more like a bonus question as to what this person meant when they made that comment.
I agree wholeheartedly.
That one is close. That one's definitely close. Anybody have any other guesses, suggestions? All right, that one was more the equivalent. He was ready to get a little biblical if he had to. Anybody that was raised in the church knows that that can get a little messy sometimes when people say that. But it basically piggybacks off of that first comment. Ready to do whatever he had to do to make sure his mom was safe.
Right. And we're seeing again this the sort of relationship with the parent. In this one, you know, he's on stage and he's there and he's nurturing, I guess I'd say, the relationship with the parent. And so that is still a part of their lives. They're trying to figure out where exactly their parents fit into their lives as they're getting older and more independent. Okay, so with some of that as context and as background and food for thought, let's talk about why we as attorneys want to try to communicate effectively. And the reason number one, avoid a bar complaint, right? Like, we got to do our job. So put that one aside. That one we count as duh. So avoid a bar complaint, check. But there are actually a ton of other, probably better reasons to get it right. So the first thing that we want to talk about is rapport. If you can have an effective communication with your client, you know, you actually have this conversation going back and forth where you're understanding each other, you're building your rapport.
And it's super important when you get in situations. Our kids have a tendency to come in for things as small as misdemeanor larceny and resisting a public officer, but they also come in for more serious felonies and things of that nature, things that could put them into potential transfer territory if the facts play out a certain way. And when it comes down to things like that, it is so important to make sure that you're building that relationship with your clients. They're more likely to be more forthcoming in the future. They're more likely to want to have open and honest communication with you in the future. And they know that no matter what happens during this process moving forward, that you're absolutely in their corner. You're not there to represent their parents. You're not there to try to convince them to do whatever their court counselor wants them to do. They know that you are there to speak for them and to make sure that they have a voice in that courtroom no matter what happens.
Absolutely. When they trust you, you are going to be able to be the most effective attorney for them. They're going to give you the information you need for you to do your job. And
sometimes information you didn't even know you needed.
Yes.
Because sometimes we look at the petition and we look at the report and we think that's everything. But what they might tell you is that two of the names that popped up in that petition are actually these individuals, and they can give you some background information, some additional context that you didn't even know played into the situation as a whole. And that could make all the difference. It makes things look maybe random on paper to more intentional when you actually put all the pieces together.
Absolutely. And then the reverse applies, right?
Yeah.
If once they are trusting you, you've got that rapport, not only can they give you more information, but you can help them to understand not only what their charges are, but kind of the bigger picture as well. The charges, that's the easier section, right? Like, here's the petition, here's what it means, here's the facts against you. Here's what we've talked about that maybe changes that. And you're having this open and honest conversation, and, you know, the child's listening to you. But bigger than that is you can help them understand sort of almost holistically where this is going to fit in potentially with the rest of their life. So have you had an example or had a situation like that where you've been able to explain the bigger picture?
Yes, especially with the younger group. I don't know the general age range that people tend to represent. I know the youngest one we have in juvenile court in Durham County right now is 11. And so we'll be having conversations with them. And sometimes the way you explain things, you think is the only way to explain things because you've never had to explain things in that context to people in simpler terms. And so really being able to sit down and break down the conversation, well, this is your first appearance, you know, this is when the judge tells you that I'm your attorney, that you're able to talk to me. The next phase is this is what we're going to do, A, B, and C, break it down and everything like that. And sometimes this is when speaking their language really comes into play, because a lot of 12-year-olds, 13-year-olds, 14 and 15-year-olds have no idea what probable cause even means. reasonable factual basis, it's kind of tough to explain that. It's really easy to talk to your colleague and I'm like, hey, Berja, I had a PC hearing the other day and, we can have a conversation like that. But when you're explaining, the 15-day PC window or waivers or probable cause or what a PC hearing looks like for your clients, you've really got to be able to have a conversation. It's like, well, the officer is going to come in here, they're going to say these things, this is the report. And to really just make sure that they're comfortable and don't feel blindsided by anything. And with all of the stages involved in the juvenile process, there are a lot of things to explain. And I tend to do those one step at a time. Like on the next court date, we're going to have this phase. And then after court, well, this is what we're set on. We're set on for, probable cause and adjudication on the next date. This is what that would mean. And so basically it's just a fancy way of saying A, B, and C until I'm like, do you understand? Do you have any questions? And let them know that their questions aren't dumb, that you're willing to take as much time as you need to make sure they understand and they're comfortable, because ultimately they're the only person that has to deal with the consequences of what happens in court.
That's exactly right. One of my favorite things to do, especially with a child that hasn't had exposure to the court system, I will really slow it down. I will take out a piece of paper and I will draw the courtroom. I will, label where people are going to be sitting. If I know who my assigned prosecutor is, I'll pull them up on Facebook. I'll say, look, this is, so-and-so. This is one of their, and kind of humanize everybody in the courtroom. Keeping it real, of course, but there's something to be said for that goes back to that trust building where I'm taking the time with my child to make sure that they understand everything that they want to understand, so that they know that I know and acknowledge that they're the ones making the decisions. They come into this system, like you said, distrusting of adults, distrusting of authority, of the system. That is the world that they have basically been growing up in for the most part.
Yeah, especially if they're in that developmental phase where the opinions of their friends matter more than the opinions of the adults around them. In their eyes, you're just another adult.
Yes.
So why should they have to listen to anything that you have to say to them?
Right. And the conversation takes a real interesting turn when you say, I'm not going to make decisions for you.
Right.
I'm going to give you the information that you need to make the decision. And then I'm going to do just about anything you tell me to do. And I love the part where I say, I'm not even going to listen to what your parents have to say.
Like, what?
And they get that little grin on their face sometimes. And I also try not to say that in front of the parents. We'll talk about that in a minute. But so when you've had this rapport, you build the trust and you're able to help your child understand, then that can turn back around again now where they are able to actually assist you in their own defense. They're able to make decisions because they have the information, or they're able to look through the discovery with you and say, like, that's not what happened.
Yeah, this didn't happen, that didn't happen. Actually, it was this person, but I know this person through such and such, and this is why that happened. And when they are engaged in what's happening in court, it makes a world of difference. It's what I tell mine all the time is that, I can get you copies of whatever you need. We can have as many conversations as you want. Because there are so many situations where they've gotten used to people having conversations about them and acting as though they're not even participants. We have CFTs and the kid's not there. Or the court counselor will talk directly to the parents and act like the kid's not there. Or we get into the courtroom and it's the judge and the attorney and the DA, and then the judge is asking parents questions like the kid's not there. And so this is one of those opportunities to make sure that, you are here. This is about you. You get to participate as much as everybody else in this courtroom gets to participate. And when they're given the opportunity to expressly participate, a lot of them take advantage of that opportunity because you'd be surprised at how often they're not even asked or acknowledged for being in the room because they're just kids.
Wow. I hate that phrase.
Yeah.
I hate that phrase. Children are the future. I think we may have a hand up. Let me pause and see if we have a question. Ruth, did you have a question? Not to put you on the spot. Sorry. 5, 4, 3, 2. Okay, so that goes really well into the next point. Another really good, no, it's backwards on here. Okay, we're going to come back to identify problems because really what I wanted to talk about first is compliance. When they have a voice, when they get to say what matters to them, if you get to the point of disposition and there are conditions put on them, then if they've had a chance to weigh in, then they will likely buy in. And then they are likely to comply with those conditions. That's awesome. Thanks, Ruth. That's like human psychology 101, right? And it applies to children. So having those communications with them leads to, even if ultimately you've got your adjudication and your disposition, even if you don't have like the world winning not guilty or not responsible or whatever, ultimately that is still a better outcome than a child that didn't participate in the process.
And it's like to make a comparison, I don't know how many people have adult clients in like district and superior court and stuff like that, but we've all had that client that just wasn't a good candidate for probation because you knew that the stuff that they were given and asked to do just wasn't going to get done because it was either something they didn't think they needed. Like, how many times have you heard people jump up and down about having to get a substance abuse assessment because why would I need that? That doesn't apply to my problems. And it doesn't get done. They wind up being on probation for 3.5 years because they don't want to do it. It's very similar to this process. If the disposition has a condition of complying with DJJ programming, I always give my kids the option. You know, we can try some things out. Let me know how you feel. If Project Build works for you and you enjoy it, we can keep that in there. Let me know. If you don't like it, we can always try something else. Because if they enjoy engaging in the programming that they already have to do, then the odds of them going and communicating with the mentorship program that's going on there is more likely to happen versus, I don't care how you feel, the judge said you have to do this, you don't get an opinion. They're going to jump up and down and kick and scream and pout and probably not show up every chance they get to not show up. It's a setup. If they do not get to have any type of voice in the thing that they're going to have to do for the next 6 months to a year.
Yes. And that's actually, you were just talking about the one that I skipped over. They're the ones that are going to help us identify the problems. We get the disposition report ahead of disposition. We go over it with our child. We say, okay, these are the things. Sometimes we know. We haven't memorized what they're going to ask for. Sometimes like 100% of the time. So we say, look, the judge is going to, the DJJ is recommending that the judge order you to XYZ. Tell me about what you think about that. School is a big one for us. Ours is, our DJJ, boilerplate language is do well in 3 classes or 4 classes or whatever, and have a meeting with school people and DJJ to have a plan to pass those classes. And so I boilerplate routinely ask the judge to change that to or. If a child is doing well, why should they also have to meet? Before doing that, I have a conversation with my kid. I say, look, I usually ask this. Tell me about school. So do you struggle in school, or are you doing well in school? Would you like the extra support? Are you anti-extra? Like, it is their choice. Even if it's something that I routinely ask for, I'd go over it with my child and I say, you tell me what. I'm not you. I don't live your life. I need to know what your life looks like so that when the judge is ordering you to do things, are you going to be able to, and are you going to want to
is this ultimate, like, is this disposition a good fit for you?
Exactly. Which is, I'm sorry, is that what's required by law?
I don't know. I mean, I feel like I'm not even an attorney sometimes. Like,
sometimes. So this is when Jasmine and I were kind of preparing to, hold on, this one's just kind of filler. Also having good communication with your, did I miss something? Okay, that's the one that we're going to talk about. Here's the one that I'm going to kind of like skip over. Having good conversations with your client just ultimately makes your job easier. Easy button, ding! But difficult conversations. This is when Jasmine and I were brainstorming how to present this information and talk about it. This was, I think, my favorite thing to talk about because it's maybe the least legalese and the most real life part of what we do. You want to go for it?
Is it which one?
This part.
Yes. And so sometimes at the end of the day, there is a very real issue of racial disparity when it comes down to the juveniles that you're going to see in court. And with that comes socioeconomic differences that maybe we as attorneys are not accustomed to, that wasn't our upbringing. So there's this huge learning curve in understanding the world that our kids are growing up in. Sometimes, you've got to find some middle ground with them to understand what's happening in their homes without the judgment. Sometimes, it might be them and two siblings in, one bedroom with a single parent that's literally trying to do the best that they can. And circumstances may not be ideal because of the way we grew up, but that is what they have. That is where they are. And that factors in so much to what they're able to do, the flexibility that that parent might have to come to court because there are two other children and a job that have to be taken care of as well. It comes down to the ability to do extracurriculars and deal with the other stuff that's placed on them by the court throughout this entire process that could last a year, it could last 3 years. There's an indefinite period of time where this stress is very present. And then it comes down to having resources for interpreters in maybe a district where interpreters are hard to come by. We have currently in Durham, I know we have a kid that speaks French. We have some that speak Spanish. We have some that speak Burmese. And I feel fortunate to work in Durham County because getting a hold of somebody to come in person may be easier. But when you live in more rural districts, that does create a problem. Mm-hmm. And it affects your client's visibility. If the way they live and the circumstances and experiences that they have are so far removed from what other people are used to, they have a tendency to fade into the background a little bit. And that's why it's so important as the attorney for juveniles to kind of throw away all the expectations and the perceptions that you think you might have to understand what the kid in front of you has going on and how that might affect their ability to proceed moving forward.
Yes. So I'm a proponent of visiting your child. And I recognize we have to balance a lot of things, including our own personal safety, when you're making decisions about how to get to know your child better. But there's something to be said about understanding the home that they're in. Mm-hmm. Okay, prime example, I had to go get papers signed for, release papers for one of my kiddos and ended up, mom had a broken down car. Okay, so I'm putting some things together about what this child is going through. I went out there. I was there for a couple minutes. I saw the home. Lo and behold, wouldn't you believe that when we come to PC hearing and the cops start saying some stuff on the stand about how he went when he visited that house, I was like, oh, you mean the house that has the door over here and you were standing in front of it? And that's right, because it's like on the 5th floor. And so, just really truly understanding where this child is coming from. But if you can't get to the house, how about a video chat, mm-hmm. right? They may not have a phone, they may not have the service, but they might. Mm-hmm. What are your other options? Maybe an investigator, if you have one through your PD office, or get one, get funds ex parte for it, and just really understand more than the charge. Mm-hmm. Understand the child.
Because the beauty of juvenile court is being able to have resources to potentially help your child pivot. Because sometimes, being in detention for the first time is what some of these kids need to be like, nope, I'm not built for this. I'm not a fan of jail. I don't ever want to go back to that. And it's worked for a few and you never see them again. Or having to come to court and being threatened with possible detention, or, kind of like the embarrassment of having to be on electronic monitoring and your friends know about it is enough to kind of like maybe shame you into doing better. But even more so, I think the crux of all of this is, especially the socioeconomic factor, is really hammering down on sometimes I don't want to and I can't aren't the same thing. So if there is a condition in Durham, I don't know who else has like teen court, but basically you can participate virtually through teen court for X amount of hours, and any restitution amount that you owe up to $200 will be paid for through teen court based off of your participation. Not all of our kids have Wi-Fi. Not all of our kids have access to technology. Not all of our kids are in a position to be able to do this. So if we blindly make teen court a condition and we keep asking, well, why haven't you done it? Why haven't you done it? And they say, I can't. Sometimes we hear it's not that hard. It's not like you have to pay the $200. What do you mean you can't? But until we ask those questions about what they have going on, we make a lot of assumptions that don't need to be made. They are not actually capable of doing these things because of the things that they don't have. Or, you know, why didn't you go, you haven't been to Project Build in the last 2 weeks. Well, maybe they don't have transportation. They live all the way on the other side of town and public transportation doesn't run where they're at. Maybe they have to take care of younger siblings or something like that, and they're just not able to based off of everything else that they have going on at home. So the court counselor might come in and have a report and saying, well, they haven't been to Project Build in the last month and a half. You as their attorney should be able to have that conversation with the court, honestly, and say, well, this is why they haven't been. Mom or dad works this shift and they're this distance away and they're 14, 15 years old. They're not able to get there by themselves. They have responsibilities at home, and then maybe reassess what the court is asking of these juveniles, because sometimes I just can't is a real answer.
What you just described, Jasmine, was, I get goosebumps, y'all. That was like the crux of defending, of zealous advocacy, of sitting up there and defending your child's position. So that is, I mean, and that's why, right? That is the point of this conversation today, is to say this is why we're talking to these children and having these conversations. Mm-hmm. All right. Jasmine, you're up again. I got nothing.
We probably should have thrown in a language warning. I'm very sorry. But this is very real social media. This is the kind of social media that a lot of our juveniles have access to. Mm-hmm. Some of them talk like this in the courtroom. Some of them talk like this in the hallway. Some of them talk like this to their parents, and their parents talk to them like this in return. But it doubles back to being able to have the same conversation that your kids are having and understanding what they're saying when they're talking to you. We're going to skip over that first part. But just back to the popcorn question and answer. But basically, ain't got no money, can't make me crash. Does anybody have, this might be one of the harder ones that I think I've thrown at y'all, but does anybody have any guess about what this individual means by that?
I take it we're not talking about driving a car in a bad way.
Absolutely not.
Great. Okay, there you go, guys. Wrong answers out of the way.
All right. And like I said, I understand that this one was definitely a little tougher. But basically what this person is saying is, you're not somebody that has any money. You're not going to make me throw away what I have going on because you don't have it together. So I know that it doesn't sound anywhere close to what they actually meant. But that is basically the premise of that post right there.
I have so much learning to do.
Well, I'll let you log into my Facebook.
All right. All right. Let's see if maybe okay, there we go. There's the click. Ethical considerations. Again, this goes back to the part about why you should do this if your only thing is not losing your bar license. Okay. So how's it? Nope. I thought I clicked too many times. Let me try one. Go back. Oh, technology.
Don't you love that?
Yeah. Something's coming up, right? There we go. Do you guys see the orange, yellow, green, and blue kind of? Okay, fantastic. All right, so here are some ethical considerations in having not just regular conversations, but effective conversations and communications with your child. So first and foremost, I should have probably put the number up, but the orange one, the duty to be knowledgeable of the social landscape, I think is like verbatim out of one of our, I think it's a opinion elaborating on a rule, or maybe a full-on rule as well. But like it's straightforward. You you can't do what you're doing. It's the competency rule. That's what it
Yeah.
is. You have a duty to be knowledgeable of the social landscape of the world that your child, your client lives in.
Like, first and foremost, bare minimum, know where they're coming from.
Yes. Yes. So now the rest of the reasons are a little bit more, goes to the core, the heart of what we do. But as the defender of a young person in court, we are expressed interest advocates. We are, all right, hang on. Just making sure everybody's awake. That's all. Don't know what happened. It's cool. Everybody awake? So the child is the one that's making the decisions, and we're effectuating those decisions. Our job is to give them the information they need to make a decision, and then to effectuate that decision that the child has made. And I put driver's ed up here because Jasmine came up with probably the best analogy I have ever heard. Go for it.
Right. So it's almost nerve-wracking sometimes to put your kid in the driver's seat. It's literally the equivalent of driver's ed. They're in a parking lot, there are a bunch of cones, and you in the passenger seat, you know how to drive a car, you know how to use the accelerator and the brake, you know how to use a turn signal, you know how to turn the wheel so you don't flip the car over. You know how to do all these things. But sometimes the trick is getting your child to make the right decisions for themselves, guiding them to a place to make the right decisions for themselves. And so sometimes at the beginning of the process, it's like foot on the gas, erratic turns, no one's wearing a seatbelt and the airbags go off. And it's one of those situations where you got to walk them through it. Well, hi, this is why we do this first. It would be in your best interest if you did A, B, and C. Putting yourself completely out there. They are the captain. They're driving the boat. You are along for the ride every single time, but the destination might wind up being where you want to go is where they also want to go. And so it's a guided effort. You know, sometimes like, well, I don't want to do this. And it's like, well, you got A, B, and C going on. Maybe give it a try. Maybe you might like this. And they still might say, nope.
Yep.
And we could revisit, you know, maybe a month or two later. But it's literally that process of, you know, this is what a seatbelt does. This is what your turn signal's for. This is what the gas and the brake do. This is why you don't turn the wheel super hard. Like, this is how you drive in reverse. This is how you parallel park, you know.
Advanced.
Yeah. And sometimes it's those steps. You have to be willing to have the car wreck sometimes to get the end result that you need, because they're going to learn from every mistake that takes place in the process. Oh, well, you're right. The airbag did go off. Oh, you're right. You know, I did hit that bush. It's literally the equivalent in the courtroom. They're going to learn through the decisions that they make, and you have to be willing and able to stay in the passenger seat from beginning to end to make sure that not only are they in a place to make informed decisions, but you're there to kind of like nudge them to maybe help them make the right decisions. I've told mine all the time. This is what I want for you. This is the potential that I see in you. I definitely believe that you're able to do A, B, and C if you stop D, E, and F. But if that is not what you want, I'm not asking the judge for it.
Yep.
I'm going to ask for what you want me to ask for. Just letting you know, though.
Here's the real honest conversation behind the doors.
But my job is this.
Yes. I think my favorite thing about this analogy is when I'm thinking of a driver's ed car, you know, the person that's driving the car has all the things, the signals, the wheel, the gas, the brake. And the person in the passenger seat, at least in driver's ed itself, they only have a brake pedal, right? So they can stop before we drive off the edge of the cliff and we both die, right? We can stop the car, but we can't direct it. We can't speed it up or anything else. We can just pause. And the part of the analogy that works really well there, I think, is if you have a point where your child is, you know, analogy wise about to go off the cliff, right? Your child is not understanding the instructions or the information that's being given. Your you're reaching the point where you feel like your child does not have the capacity to proceed. They can't assist in your defense no matter how hard you've tried. There's a bigger issue going on, then yes, you can put the brakes on, have your capacity evaluation and kind of take over, if you will. But you've got to reach that point where your child is not able to drive that car before we get there. So I just, your analogy was 10 out of 10. All right. So it has taken us 49 or so minutes to get to talking about the parents, even though it was at the very beginning in the title slide.
Yeah, we're real close.
The parents, right? They're involved in this process from the very beginning. They get a copy of the petition so they know what the child's been charged with, and they're not technically a party, but they are under the jurisdiction of the court. They definitely have their opinions. And a lot of times their whole life they've been trying to help this child make decisions and don't understand why they aren't allowed to be involved in this process. So every attorney is going to kind of have their own way of approaching this, and we'll talk about that here in a second. But take a step back and remember, as the child's attorney, you're representing that child and their interest. That parent may or may not, you have to make a professional sort of judgment here, may or may not have information to contribute to the conversation that the child, can take into consideration. But, okay, so one of my favorite conversations to have with parents is if I talk about the facts of what happened in this room with you, because the parents, they've seen the petition, but they're like, okay, what happened? Why are you charged with this? I know my kid doesn't carry a gun. If I talk about the facts with you in the room, ma'am, let's talk about what happens with confidentiality. They're going to put you on the stand and they're going to say, tell me everything that just happened. And then, ma'am, you have a choice between going to jail or throwing your kid under the bus. Which one would you like?
There's no parent-child privilege.
Different soapbox. We'll get on that another day. But as of today, there is no parent-child privilege. And so that's when, for me, when I approach it, the parent's sort of light bulb goes off. Oh, I need to step out of the room. I don't need to know the facts of what happened, right? That is this. So this kind of goes back. It's a whole another CLE, rapport with the parent, right? We've got like one bullet note on this one, rapport with the parent. But when you've got the rapport with your parent, you can have that conversation and say, well, I need you to step out during this part. And then you make strategic choices with your child. Sorry, I'm going to correct myself. Your child is going to make strategic decisions about what parts of your conversation are had with the parent and without the parent. I always like to remind my children that if they ultimately decide they're going to admit on something that they haven't talked about their parent with, they may choose to tell their parent before we get right in front of a judge and they hear it for the first time with their child. Yes. So, some timing of some of those conversations, and parents can have a lot to say about the disposition, the conditions. Before I jump into the before and after transfer part of it, do you have any thoughts on while it's still in delinquency court? What's your approach with parents?
I usually try to make sure that parents feel involved every step of the way, because at the end of the day, they have special conditions on them, just like the juveniles do. They have to come to court. They have to make themselves available to, DJJ. They've got to come back and forth for all these appointments and everything like that. And sometimes when they know that they can also come talk to you about any issues they're having at home, that's an opportunity to curb some stuff before the next court date. It's an opportunity to maybe get some additional resources in place that DJJ maybe didn't have on their radar. It's an opportunity to maybe talk about why they need to come home at night so they don't have to run around on electronic monitoring because they're not where they're supposed to be. I do make it a point to let them know at the end of the day, I value your opinion. This is at the end of the day your child. I know that you care and that you are invested. However, even if I disagree with what your child wants, I have to ask for what your child wants, and we can just address all of that after court. And usually that tends to work for me because it's honest, it's transparent. Like, I'm not disagreeing with anything that they're saying a lot of times because, like I said, they know their kids.
Yeah.
I did have one though that was like, my kid doesn't carry guns. They didn't know that their child had posted 7 pictures on Instagram, which was super public, by the way, of them carrying firearms. So I knew in that moment that this kid was keeping things from their mom, and maybe mom wasn't fully aware of the situation. So that was an indicator to kind of tread a little carefully on that one, and maybe not say too much and only ask her what her opinion was without contributing any information that could put my juvenile in a tight spot when they were home.
Yep. You can navigate the conversation with the parent in a way that you have them on your team, and they're contributing to ultimately what the child wants without crossing any of those boundaries that we can't otherwise cross.
Like, you're not an adversarial party to the process.
Yeah. And so there are going to be those times where you have to get them out of the room, like I was saying. And that's where, when you involve them in the conversation, you build that rapport, and then you say, well, okay, I need you out of the room for this part of it. And they say, okay, you know, you've answered the questions that you're allowed to answer. I understand you're trying to do what you got to do for my kid. I'm willing to step out. Not every parent is going to be that cooperative, I guess, is reasonable. And sometimes you do have to get the judge involved. 7B 2001, Terry, yes, she's nodding her head, is just kind of keep that in the back of your mind. If you've got a really difficult parent who just keeps roadblocking you, you can actually have a guardian appointed in the case. IDS rules and payment rules aside, like, don't even expect that they get paid, but ultimately you can have somebody else, for example, sign off on getting documents or something to that effect. So those options are available if you just have that parent that just won't. One other thing for me to add while the thing tries to catch up, keep in mind cultural differences. I had, as a female attorney, I try to be very aware when I have, when I'm interacting. Yes. There you go. In the chat box, Terry's got your 7B 2001 comment. Can get paid. Great, even better. So in cultures where there's a hierarchy, let me make sure I'm saying this properly. In cultures where there is a hierarchy between genders, I try to keep that in mind. So if I have a gentleman, okay, cannot get paid. Okay, y'all just listen to whatever they have to say in the chats. I'll stop trying to read half of it at once. You know, I've got a father and the child, and the father's like, who are you to tell me to get out of the room when my child is in here, right? So in addition to all the other tricks in my toolbox that I got to add one more to be sensitive to that cultural hierarchy. Thankfully, I have a background in one of those cultures, and if you've ever watched My Big Fat Greek Wedding, the phrase in there is, men may be the head of the household, but women, we are the necks. We turn the head whichever way we need it to look. So, you know, some tools in my toolbox on that one.
And one I will add, sometimes if you, like, maybe if you have a client who is Muslim and they happen to be female, you may run into issues being a male attorney, and there could be some issues with being in a room with a man that's not a family member. So these are things that definitely need to be taken into consideration, and maybe plan to have like an additional, like the female court counselor or something like that present in the room to remedy that situation. But they definitely play a bigger role than I think we tend to acknowledge sometimes.
Yep. So here's some more language. This one, I really appreciated this slide because it's got the direct translation. It's like, I'm not going to say, hey, Google, I just said it and now my phone's going to light up. But like, there you go. I have seen these and now I know what they mean. I did not know thirsty, trying to get attention. Okay. I did know YOLO because I'm actually old enough for that one. And I've heard goat, I think, enough times that I knew what it was before I saw this. But so these kinds of sources, if you're Google it, I know Google's not the final answer, but it's a good place. If you've got stuff where you're trying to figure this out, do it. Just Google it and you'll get some answers on what you're seeing and what it might mean. The beginning of my conversation with Jasmine about doing a presentation on effective communication, I don't even remember how I got here, but I was like, we got to call it CAP. And then I put the little emoticon, whatever, the icon, the cap, because that's not a baseball cap. The word cap means
you lying. It just means you lying. You're lying.
So 10 points to anybody who knew that from the beginning and knew it wasn't actually a baseball cap. Your virtual points will be emailed to you later. All right. So we've got, okay, the technology's not going to work on this. It's supposed to be really pretty, like sliding around the screen. Okay, let's see if it does it. So there's one. Let's do a nice little slide. Yes, no?
It didn't do it.
It's trying to. It's like frozen halfway through. Maybe it'll straighten
I feel
up.
like if it looks right on that one, there we go.
There it go. Okay. All right, so here's some more examples of our children, the world they live in, and some of the things that you're gonna see.
Yeah.
This is you. This is all you.
Yeah, I got you. All right, so starting with the one on the far left, the caption says, "I really used to spray for free. No rats and gonna spray for me."
That does not say that.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's an emoji rat.
Oh.
Yeah, it's a rat. And so these are definitely, like I said, tougher than the ones that we had in the beginning, but I still want to open the floor up real quick to see if anybody has any guesses, quick guesses. Right, I didn't think so. All right, so basically the first one is, and this kind of, before I mentioned, it's one of those situations we're acknowledging that there has been a shift in perspective, a shift in the world that these kids live in. I know that the analogy that I tend to use is that when we were younger, it was normal to like smoke a little weed, get into fist fights, and like that was like the peak of the kind of trouble we got into. These days, carrying a gun and doing harder drugs like Percocets and, you know, a little like coke and stuff like that. As crazy as this sounds to us for our juveniles to be involved in this kind of stuff, the plane has completely transformed to where this is more normal. A lot of us, especially here in like the Durham, you know, Raleigh, Chapel Hill area, a lot of our juveniles are taking guns to school because they know that somebody else in their English class has a gun and they'd rather have one and need it than need it and not have it. Or they have been in situations where they have lost friends right in front of them to gun violence. And while this seems like an aggressively defensive measure to take, this is the reality of the world that they live in. So when we're having conversations with our juveniles about guns and things of that nature and they seem a little dismissive, it's not to say that they don't understand the seriousness of carrying a gun. They have more likely than not seen firsthand what guns can do. I think a lot of them are just afraid to be put in a position where they also die. So it's not that they don't care. They are aware. It just doesn't necessarily rank in importance to them the way it ranks in importance to us. That's not a world that we grew up in, but it's their day to day. And so not to say that we shouldn't continue to have those conversations with them about why certain things shouldn't happen, but like I said, you kind of relax your perspectives and your expectations a little bit to be able to have that conversation with your juveniles about what their day-to-day looks like.
Yeah.
And so to kind of go back to the screen, the first caption basically means I used to just run around carrying guns just for myself, but now I have other people that are also willing to do this kind of stuff for me. Gunna is a reference to a rapper that got arrested for snitching, and so that's what that is. Bonus points if anybody knows who Gunna is. The second one says, in school was running that ball trying to catch me a play. Any guesses about what he means by trying to catch a play?
Touchdown?
No, I wish. I
Okay.
wish.
Trying to
All
catch a
right,
break?
so no, good guess though. All right, so trying to catch a play, theater.
Theater.
I wish. Got one in the chat that said theater. I wish. Basically trying to catch a play is basically trying to catch an opportunity to make some money. So, and sometimes this is in reference to like drugs. I'm just trying to catch a play real quick. I'm trying to, you know, sell this weed real quick to make a little bit of money. I'm trying to, you know, do whatever. It's usually in reference to trying to find just a quick, easy money making opportunity. Moving on to the third one. All these folks talking about switches, chopper came automatic. Does anybody maybe have any context or reference as to maybe what they have going on?
He pressed the button and switched the switch, and the helicopter landed and came and got him.
We need to be closer friends if he's got access to helicopters.
That's true. That's true.
All right. So, okay, there we go. We're getting somewhere. Mr. Carey said that chopper's an automatic gun. We are definitely halfway there with that one.
Okay, so we're not at a helicopter.
Not
Got
at
it.
a helicopter. And so, I don't know how many people are familiar with automatic switches that come with, I see them more often with Glock 19s with a lot of my cases. And so what you can do is you can buy a switch to put on your Glock, turns your semi-automatic weapon into a fully automatic weapon. And so basically what this guy is talking about right here, oddly enough, isn't even in the context of guns, ironically enough. He said, basically, this is what I do all the time. I'm the chopper, I'm automatic. You guys have to do something extra to get to the level that I'm on. I've been doing this. You guys are new here. Like I said, I know these were tougher, but this is the world. This is the world that our juveniles live in. This is the way they talk to each other. This is the way they talk on their public Instagram pages. This is the kind of learning curve that we're pretty much up against when it comes down to getting on the same page and having this conversation. And actually, when we went to lunch, one of the, I guess, the tips that we could throw in there is if you're having a harder time understanding some of your clients, but maybe don't have the social media profile to give you that extra edge, download TikTok. Click on things that have nothing to do with the stuff that you actually like, and click on the things that your juveniles are actually interested in. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of like Babbel. For 10 minutes a day, you could become fluent in adolescent. Like, sometimes it really is just something as small as that. Watch the stuff that they're watching, kind of get immersed in the world that they're in, and it might give you some context for the things that they're exposed to, the things that they say, the things that they do, and the things that are influencing them.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm pretty sure that counts as billable hours. That's field research, right?
Yes.
Great. Chad, you can correct me if I was wrong on that. So the reverse is true too. They have their language, and then we have our language. And so there's a middle ground to be had. Not only when we're in the juvenile courtroom do we need to worry about the difference between the adult words and then the words we use in our courtroom, but those words, you can see the first two columns are all really big words, and there might be even better plain English words that we can use. So an adult is a defendant, a juvenile justice equivalent of that is respondent, but in plain English, that's you. Mm-hmm. Adult says not guilty. Juvenile justice, out of court hours, payable, and TikTok is cheaper than paying a translator. There you go, guys. Do it. So we've got not guilty if you're an adult. In our courtroom, that's a denial of responsibility, or in plain English, that's nope. So, and then I've got a couple here that I've got question marks on. So arrest, with us, that's custody. But sometimes I go back to that word that is an adult word because it's familiar to my child. We have a conversation. I say, when I say to the judge custody, this is what I'm talking about. We use different words in here because a child is different. But when I talk about that, I'm talking about that part where you got arrested, mm-hmm. or whatever that word is that's familiar to them. So not only do they have their own language, we've got our own language, and we need to make sure that we are effectively communicating. My 2 cents on texting and messaging with clients. Please do it. This is how they talk. This is how they communicate. My own daughter, I have said, why don't you call? And the word call comes out of my mouth and you can see her go pale. There's a different social structure in this age group. The way they communicate is by words, not voice, by words on a screen. Actually makes for relatively good decision-making skills sometimes if you think about it. But the bottom line is, if we're trying to be effective with our communications, take advantage of the fact that this is accessible to everybody. So
because our kids aren't checking the mail, our kids aren't checking voicemail, our kids are not returning emails.
I actually had a conversation with a defender once. He said, how do I approach the situation? My kid's not in court. Neither is the parent. I said, well, how old's your kid? 15. So does he have his own phone? No. Does he have his own, does he drive? No. Does he check the mail for the house? No. The parents are blocking all of these, traditional methods of communication that we have. So he probably had his own phone, but maybe not his own number, which is common, right? Wi-Fi. So, take advantage of where they actually are. Instagram, Messenger, WhatsApp, and Google Voice is actually a really good one.
That's the one I use.
That's the one I use.
And you can save the numbers in your phone, and they're like regular contacts. You can pick your own number. So I picked an area code that is familiar to where we are. So it doesn't look like spam from Montana or something like that. You can send text messages. It transcribes any voicemails that you may have. You get notifications the same way you would for anything else. And you get the luxury of having those conversations, because juvenile's not 9 to 5. Yeah. Things happen after hours. Things happen on the weekends. There's a constantly evolving situation when it comes to juvenile cases. And so it would be a shame for something to happen at like 6 o'clock on a Friday night and you not know till Monday morning. And so I would definitely, like, shameless plug for Google Voice.
Yes.
It has made all the difference.
Link to easy lesson FAQ on Google Phone.
I don't know, but if there is one, I can make sure that it's put out there.
Yeah, we can find it. I'm sure Google is good to, forgive me for saying this, but dumb it down. So make it accessible. Easily accessible is the politically correct way to say that. So we'll definitely find and share that. It's also good for CYA. The thing to remember is, because they're third party hosted, confidentiality of your communications, keep that in mind. We can't have a complete conversation about effective communication without talking about other languages, interpreters. Remember, there are a lot of resources, and it's most of these resources, especially if they're in the courtroom, are free, not just because a person is indigent. Of course, all of our juveniles are, but so the Office of Language Access Services are the head of, here are the resources. About every other language, Spanish is obviously the biggest second language. In court, there's out of court services. They can do by telephone. They can translate they do translate forms, and they do transcription and translation services as well. They maintain a registry. There's the link. That's about 43 pages long, with about 25 names per page of Spanish interpreters, organized by Language Access Services. Are truly terrible. Not sure what the solution is, but many times I wonder if they've ever. Yes, I didn't read the whole comment, but there can definitely be quality concerns. So one thing I might suggest, on that registry where that link is, these people are organized by certification level and by their region. A lot of them offer video Zoom services. If you go up in certification level, you will see an increase in the quality of the interpreting services. It's worth checking out, and I'm happy to have a conversation with anybody who would like to know more.
I think you may be able to request a specific interpreter by name. So maybe if there's somebody in the office that has a better success rate or better communication abilities with a certain interpreter, ask for recommendations, pass that name along to somebody else, because there's definitely a quality discrepancy. I think everywhere would be safe to say, but the ones that definitely come with like a higher just level of care, I guess. I'm sure we've all run into that issue, and I'm sure we all have somebody that we would recommend for our area.
Yeah, definitely. So feel free to reach out and let's see if we can't kind of pinpoint. And they do, you should remember that they do have, can I make a, yes, Chelsea, do you want to unmute?
Yes, I was just going to shed some light on an experience I had here in Randolph County with a Urdu interpreter.
Oh,
I think I'm
interesting.
saying it correctly. Their culture is very, very close in Ashburn, North Carolina, Randolph County area. Very, very close in the community. And I actually had an incident where I caught an Urdu interpreter trying to, it was a DV case, trying to basically, I just happened to pick up, and it wasn't because I understood their language, but I happened to notice my client feeling very uncomfortable. And I just happened to notice like her facial expressions and how she was acting toward this other female interpreter. And come to find out, that interpreter was trying to pass along messages from the DV offender and trying to force her to meet with him and the family. So all I can say is, just as someone, you know, is not aware of their culture, I've not really been around a lot of people, just be aware of, you know, because this person doesn't speak any English, you know, so be aware of their facial reactions. If you're looking at someone, they don't seem like they're responding to the interpretations that you're giving, make sure that you're able to, even children, make sure that you're able to like watch that, because people's body language can say a lot.
Yes.
That's huge.
Yes. Body language, I'd say, trumps all linguistical languages. That's not a real word. Thank you for sharing that, Chelsea. We're going to lose that in a second, but everything's.
Yes.
Might have to go back to that. I'm going to leave this slide up because we've gotten to that point, and, you know, if we have time, if anybody wants to stick around to do questions. So I'm going to, maybe Yolanda will be able to pull up Darren's comment for us here in a second. But there's our contact information. If you don't mind to either scan this QR code or follow the link that's going in the chat to give us some feedback about how today's session was. We have thick skin. We are attorneys. It's fine. Please tell us what you think. Thanks, Mary. What do you think we can do better? Or if all you think it was great, maybe tell us why. What was your favorite part of today's presentation? What did you learn that you're going to take with you into the courtroom? I was going to say tomorrow. Please don't go into a courtroom tomorrow. On Monday. Because we take that information, and the next time we do this, we try to do it better every single time. Absolutely. You know, we go from A+ to A++. All right, so Yolanda, can you share with us what Darren's comment was?
Yes, just before we get there, if you have to leave, again, if you are a call-in user, please just either send me your bar number or put it in a private chat to me before you get out, just so I can make sure you get CLE credit. And if you do have to leave, thank you so much for attending. We really appreciate your time. But to Darren's comment, he said, the last 2 cases I've had, the first thing they said in open court on speakerphone is everything you say is confidential. And he's like, I think he's saying that, how is it confidential when you're in open court?
Yeah.
Yep, that's.
To remedy those issues, we have turned the volume down on the phone so that it was less obvious to everybody else in the courtroom what was happening. But I do understand that sometimes that is the only opportunity that people have to have a translator available. I think that is an issue that can definitely be run up the flagpole for issues in the future, because I can definitely see how that's super problematic.
Yeah, I guess depending on the context, maybe something I might have See, this is where, yeah, has anybody else experienced the sadness that comes with losing our masks and part of our filter? And like, I can make some faces behind my mask in court that I can't always do now when somebody does or says something. But, you know, I'm just kind of, my style is if I see something, I very politely call it out.
Mhm.
Your Honor, I'd like the record to reflect that this is an open courtroom, and while the juvenile file is confidential, the courtroom in this conversation is not.
Mhm.
There are others in here that are much nicer and much more polite than I. They're less at risk of going to jail at the end of the day.
It's not me.
But you and I will bail each other out. We can just never be in the same courtroom together because we don't have a third person to come get us. Oh, yes, we do. I see some faces of people that would come get us, so we're good.
Hey, Berja.
Yes.
This is Julie Boyer. I'm still
Yes.
available to pick you up
There's another
anytime.
one. All right, so
And,
we got.
Yeah, so I called in on my way back from Surrey Juvenile Court because you know that's an awesome place.
Oh,
and
boy.
yeah, Mary will bail us out too. And I know
Yes.
her brother, so he's got some money. So first of all, the best part of the presentation is in fact Jasmine's shirt. I just want to say that.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, absolutely. But you and I have had a lot of chats about difficult parents, grandparents, custodians, things like to the part where they are literally interfering
Yes.
in your ability to represent your kid. And that is a very frustrating thing to do. Like, clearly the kid needs an evaluation, probably at Central Regional Hospital. Well, sure, but oh my God, so-and-so said that then he'll be locked up in a psych hospital. And so they tell the kid, do not listen to your lawyer, do not cooperate, do not do anything. And yes, and that's when I call Berja. And I usually use exceptionally colorful language when I do that.
This is why we have bald spots.
And gray
Yes.
hairs.
I have
Yes,
white
and gray
hair.
hairs. Oh, Jasmine said she names her gray hairs after.
Every gray hair I have is named after one of my juveniles.
So for record though, like I don't see any.
They're
but
they're
okay,
hiding.
okay.
Oh, they're hiding. The lighting in here.
But yes, that Julie, you make a good point. Just for anybody, sort of like reference, if you want to call and vent to us about a case that you're having trouble with, I know there's not always a really good answer, but we're here to just let you vent and say, I can't even believe. Tell me more, girl. Tell me more.
Right. Because sometimes that does help take the edge off. Sometimes you have to have that conversation, not necessarily looking for solutions, so that you can clear your brain to problem solve on the back end. But I do think OJD has some resources available on the homepage about what needs to be done if a guardian needs to get involved in a juvenile case. And I definitely think having extra eyes and ears on the situation to also put a foot down with that parent or guardian should help take some of the stress off of your plate, but also help that transition from beginning to resolution be a whole lot cleaner.
Yep.
And how is she not in our group text? I want to know this, Berja.
I'm on it. There's some really inappropriate language in our group text.
It's my favorite.
Yes.
Did anybody else have any questions that they wanted to run by us?
Uh-oh, we've started a thing. We should just have like a defender vent group.
Oh yeah, that could be fun.
Okay. This is a thing. This is a thing. Yeah.
As long as nobody like screenshots and sends it to the prosecutors like they do in the criminal defense bar Facebook page.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, Snapchat it is.
I know who she's talking about.
Oh.
Well, I will just mention that Nani, who is our new communications specialist, wrote in the chat, if you haven't already, don't forget to follow OJD on social media. And she left a link there, which will link to all of our different social media sites. So please feel free to click that link.
There's a lot of good information on those too. A lot of good information.
Yes. Darren, when you screenshot in Snapchat though, it tells us.
So
it tells everybody else. I'll text
stitches
it
get
has to be
stitches.
done in youth speak.
Yeah, stitches get stitches. Keep that in mind. We can see you.
Yeah. We know who took the screenshot. Oh, awesome. Well, thanks you guys. Thanks, Jasmine. Oh, most important part. I am going to need everybody that's left on the call, real quick, if you can, to please unmute your microphone and join us I'm going to unshare my screen. It is Jasmine's birthday today. So I would love if you would unmute your microphone. Please don't make me be the only one. All right, Julie's on board. And sing happy birthday with me to, she's already blushing. Are we ready? Singing happy birthday to Jasmine. 3, 2, 1. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Jasmine.
Happy birthday to you. How old are you?
That's a rude question.
32.
No, I'm 32 today.
Oh, you're just a baby.
I am a baby. I am.
Awesome.
But thank you
Yeah.
guys. I really appreciate that.
The whole state of North Carolina juvenile defense community wishes you a happy birthday.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Berja and Jasmine, for the presentation. We really appreciate it. We've all learned a lot of great information. Unless people have any other questions for Jasmine and Berja, we will end here. I will follow up with an email with the PowerPoint attached again and just the link to the evaluation. Thank you all for joining us. Have a great Friday.
Bye, y'all.
Thank you.